Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that we will be considering a handful of amendments and we're going to be discussing this, but before we begin that process, I just wanted to take a moment to connect what we're doing here with our zoning decisions back to some of the real pressing issues within our community, especially as it relates to homelessness and housing availability. There's a growing body of research across the country from the University of Washington and in the comprehensive 2022 study that they put out and well beyond, showing that homelessness is not really linked to personal struggles. It's primarily a housing problem, right? Cities with high homelessness rates tend to have very high rents and very low housing availability. Rates of poverty, mental illness, things like that are not indicators of homelessness. We see this play out in states like California, which have lower poverty rates than West Virginia, despite much higher rates of homelessness. I like to think of this in our community as a game of musical chairs. If we have 10 people and 10 chairs, it means everyone gets a seat, even if you're on crutches. However, when somebody enters the game or moves to our community or grows up and it's time for them to be in the community, you then have more people than chairs. So when the music stops and it's time for everyone to sit down, someone's not going to have a chair, and it will likely be the person on crutches. The only way to solve that problem is to add chairs. In Lakewood, in Colorado, and frankly across the United States, we have done a poor job of adding chairs to make sure that everybody has one. We've done that for so long that we're now in a crisis. We must start catching up, and it's our moral obligation as a community to do that. We've seen this pattern replicated across the country. A study from Zillow has suggested that when rents rise by just 5% in a tight market, thousands of people may be pushed into homelessness. Here in Lakewood, average rents have risen by about 5% over the last 5 years, right? That's happening here in our community. That might seem modest on paper, but for a lot of families and a lot of people, that's the difference between staying housed and falling into crisis. Meanwhile, the Metro Denver point in time count recorded nearly 10,000 more people experiencing homelessness, a 10% increase over the previous year. These aren't abstract numbers, right? These are real people in our region, in our community, in our towns who cannot afford a place to live. As commissioners, we don't have the authority to deliver social services, right? But we can influence how much housing gets built. When zoning restricts multifamily housing, duplexes, ADUs, we limit supply and drive up the costs and reduce options for working families, for seniors, and for people on fixed incomes. The only reason to block denser housing options is to protect the privilege of those who already have theirs, and it ends up leaving the rest out to dry. Cities like Minneapolis and Portland have embraced thoughtful zoning reform and have seen slower rent growth and fewer people entering homelessness, and it's our moral obligation to do the same. The decisions we're going to make today about zoning may feel technical, but they're also moral. If we want to keep Lakewood inclusive and resilient and livable, we must build more housing that is denser and communities that are more walkable. I just want us to keep this in mind as a body and as a community as we have this discussion, because it is a moral obligation that we have to continue to do that. And so I just wanted to enter that into the record before we start this broader conversation so that we can make sure that we're keeping in mind why we're doing this, right? Why we're adopting additional zoning. It's to make sure that we can provide housing for our neighbors and in our community. And that's what's driving my decision making, and I hope all of us here. So I just wanted to enter that into the record before we get started on these. I know we have a lot more to discuss, but I appreciate it, Chair, for you allowing me to make that statement.